You ever wonder how much history can be packed into just a single sentence? Well, today, we're going to find out. We are taking one line, just one sentence, from a historical text and unpacking the absolutely epic story of an empire's collapse that's hidden right inside. So yeah, let's dive in. Here it is. This sentence right here, this is our entire universe for this explainer. Now, at first glance, it looks pretty simple, right? Almost like something you'd just skim past in a textbook. But trust me, inside these few words, there's a huge story of collapsing fronts, a world-changing decision, and a final dramatic act. We're going to break it all down piece by piece. Okay, so let's start with that very first clause. As Allied forces closed in, this isn't just a bit of setup. No, this is the entire stage for the collapse. It paints this incredible picture of a world war reaching its violent and, totally inevitable conclusion in the spring of 1945. To really get what this means, you have to try and imagine the sheer scale of it all. This wasn't just one army on the move. We're talking millions of soldiers, thousands upon thousands of tanks and planes. From the Soviet Union storming in from the east, and from the Western Allies, the Americans, the British, the French, and more, pushing from the west. They were all converging on this one single spot, the capital of the Third Reich. An entire continent's war was literally shrinking down to the size of just one city.
And what's so powerful here is how this visualizes that phrase, closed in. You can actually see this massive, crushing pincer movement. From the east, you have the Red Army, which had just fought its way across all of Eastern Europe. And from the west, the Allied forces, who'd pushed all the way across France and deep into Germany. And the end wasn't just coming. It was a geographical certainty at this point. Berlin was completely and totally trapped.
All right, so that brings us to the next part of the sentence. And this is where the focus shifts. It moves from these massive armies down to a single critical decision. Hitler remained in Berlin. With the military situation being absolutely hopeless, the leader's choice suddenly becomes the focal point of the entire story.
And that, right there, that's the crucial question, isn't it? When the most logical thing to do for survival is to run, to try and regroup, or maybe even negotiate, why would you choose to stay in a city that's become a death trap? The answer to this is really the key to understanding the final, chaotic days of the regime. So the choice really just boiled down to these two paths. On one hand, you had the pragmatic option, survival over sacrifice. But instead, the path of symbolism was chosen. To remain in Berlin was to make a powerful statement, that the regime would die right where it was born, that there would be absolutely no surrender, only a final, all-consuming, destructive stand. And that single decision, the decision to stay, it funnels all those vast global forces we've been talking about down to one man in one place. And it leads directly to the sentence's grim conclusion. This is it. This is the final act of the drama.
And this term, this concept, it explains the mindset behind that final act perfectly. The title of our source, tterda mmerung, or Twilight of the Gods, it's not just some dramatic name they picked out of a hat. It's a whole concept, rooted deep in mythology, describing a final, epic battle that leads to the world's total destruction. For the regime's true believers, the decision to stay and face annihilation in Berlin was like consciously acting out this myth. And understanding this is so important because it explains why they pursued this spectacular, all-consuming end instead of just a negotiated peace.
And just like that, the very first words of our sentence suddenly hit with their full weight. 1945. It's not just a date anymore, is it? It's the final timestamp for the end of an era. This is that single point in history where the armies, the decisions, and the mythology all crash together. And so that final clause, and eventually took his own life, well, it stops being a shocking twist. It becomes the illogical and, frankly, the only possible endpoint. Once the decision was made to stay in a doomed city, to embrace a myth of total destruction over plain old survival, this was always going to be the outcome. It was inevitable. So let's just look at it one last time. It doesn't quite read the same way now, does it? You can almost feel the weight of those armies closing in. You can see that stark choice between fleeing and staying. And you can understand the ideology that led to that final destructive act in an underground bunker. It's all right there.
It kind of leaves you with this one last thought. We're so used to learning history in these big, sweeping chapters and dense books. But sometimes the entire essence of an epic downfall, all the strategy, the psychology, the ideology, it can all be found compressed right inside a single, carefully written sentence. It makes you wonder, what other huge stories are just hiding in plain sight?